Hello everyone and welcome back to the Football Forecast. And today's going to be going through my Premier League predictions for Game Week 12. If you enjoy this, it would be great if you could subscribe to the channel. So starting off with Burnley, Chelsea at Turf Moor. And look, Chelsea go into this game as favourites, there's no doubt about this. Burnley have been decent in these sort of games so far this season. If you look at sort of how they performed, they lost 1-0 at home to Liverpool, but they were unlucky to lose this game. They conceded a penalty in the last minutes, and this could be a very similar sort of game. You look at the Arsenal game they had at home this season as well, and look, they lost 2-0, but they were reasonably solid. They're not going to be a sort of team, I think, they're going to ship 5 or 6 goals at home this season. Burnley are going to be very solid and hard to beat. That's sort of going to be what Scott Parker sends them out to do. And look, what more do you want them to do in this sort of situation? The issue is that they're unlikely to offer much going forward. So for that reason, I'm going to give Chelsea a clean sheet, despite not being that convinced by Chelsea's defence without Levi Colwill, who is still absent because of injury. Look at the other Chelsea players that are out for this game. Cole Palmer's out. Enzo Fernandez is out. But I still think Chelsea should have enough to win this game. I'm going to go with a 2-0 win for Chelsea. So then we're on to Bournemouth, West Ham, and I do think West Ham are going to struggle in this game. Look, they've started to pick up the form under Nuno. I think that's evident. They got a 3-2 home win against Burnley a couple of weeks ago, and the week before that, they got a 3-1 win over Newcastle. And picking up some home form was absolutely important in terms of staying up for West Ham. But there is something crucial that they're now missing for this game. And potentially Potts is out for West Ham. And I think he's added so much to that West Ham midfield since he's come in. He's given an extra sort of mobility in that midfield, which they are really lacking. And he can play in the 6. And this has really freed up Matheus Fernandes and Paqueta. And I think that's why they're looking like a completely different side. And if he's out, I can't see West Ham winning this game. Bournemouth have looked like a very strong side so far this season, and I am expecting Bournemouth to go on and win this game. Despite being at left back, Juve's actually been one of West Ham's promising players going forward this season. But I think Semenyo is going to be able to handle them quite well. Semenyo spends a lot of time actually defending. And I think this is going to be a really interesting battle to see who gambles more. Does Semenyo decide to go up the pitch a bit more because he knows Juve is more attacking? Or does he sort of drop in and help the defence? It's going to be interesting to see sort of how Iraola uses Semenyo for this game. But I think that's going to be a key battle. For this game, I'm going to go with a 3-1 win for Bournemouth. Then we're on to Brighton, Brentford, two sides that are right next to each other in the table in 11th and 12th place. And look, I think for Brighton, this is a pretty disappointing position. I think Brighton need to be doing better in certain games. I do sort of think, though, this game might suit them a bit more. They may be allowed to get a bit more on the front foot. And look, Brentford are going to try counter-attack. I think there's no doubt about this. And Brighton will probably be given more time to sort of play out from the back than other away games where I think they've struggled recently. For Brentford, the fact that Brentford are in this position is really promising for them because a lot of people saw them struggling. I didn't. I just think they're such a well-run club. It's that simple. And I think their pacing behind can cause Brighton some issues right now. And usually with this sort of game, I think I would probably go over Brighton win. I think this suits them quite a bit. But Brentford's form recently has been really good. They've picked up 4 wins in their last 5. Brighton's form's been pretty mixed. So I'm going to go actually with a draw. I'm going to go with a 1-1 draw for this game. So then we're on to Fulham, Sunderland, and part of me thinks this could be actually a game where Sunderland may struggle a bit more, and that's because I think they're going to be forced to sort of go to Fulham, and actually I think Marco Silva is going to make Sunderland break them down, which I don't really think suits Sunderland's playstyle. Sunderland have been very good on the counter without the ball, and I don't think they've had many games so far where they've been forced to sort of be the side that looks to play with the ball. And I think when they have been, for example, that Burnley game, they really struggled. Burnley gave them the ball more, but it was more of a balanced affair. And that's natural because when a newly promoted side comes up, teams look to attack them more. That's sort of just how it works. And I think Fulham might just be a bit more clever here. They might sit in a bit more and make it difficult. And it can be difficult with sort of games. We saw an example of this, I think, is someone like a Forest, where sides sort of just started sitting in against Forest and they were sort of worked out a bit. So for this reason, I actually am going to go with a Fulham win. I do think this is maybe where Sunderland's sort of form starts to come to an end, but I do think they pick it up eventually when they get back at home. So I'm going to go with a 2-1 win for Fulham. So then we're on to Liverpool, Nottingham Forest. And I think usually for Liverpool, you'd say it should be a reasonably comfortable fixture. They're at home to a side that is struggling in the relegation zone. But Liverpool haven't been the best so far this season. I think that's very much fair to say. They're struggling recently. They've just come off a 3-0 loss to Manchester City, where it started to feel like maybe they were starting to turn a corner, but I feel like they just sort of went back to square one after that loss. And it's sort of challenging signs as a Liverpool fan. I just can't really pick up when our next wins are going to be, where our guaranteed wins are going to be. But this does feel like a game we should still be able to win. We're at home, and Forest aren't playing very well. They're very susceptible defensively so far. They haven't been able to keep any clean sheets. And for that reason, I am going to back the Liverpool win. Forest have Hudson-Odoi out. They have Chris Wood out. So I'm going to go with a 3-1 win for Liverpool. Alisson Becker might be available as well for Liverpool, which would be a huge help in terms of defensively. And look, we need to start turning a corner, and that's not even to really just get into that back into that title race. It's also just to ensure that we are going to get top 4 this season, and it's not become a top 4 race instead of what it should be, which is a title race. So then we're on to Wolves, Crystal Palace, and look, this is going to be an interesting game. Wolves are really struggling. It is that simple. But they do have a new manager in charge in Rob Edwards, and they are going to be desperate for a manager bounce. Do I see this manager bounce happening? Potentially not. I think Wolves need it if they've got any chance of staying up. Right now, I'd say they've almost got 0 chance. They're that poor of a side, and they desperately need 3 points from this game, or at least just some fight and a good performance, especially at home at the Molineux. Do I think this will happen? As I said, no. I think Crystal Palace will be able to go with a very strong side. They're pretty well rested after international break. Not all their players got international duty, and after sort of a grueling sort of 3 or 4 weeks where they've had to almost play the first team in every sort of 3 days to stay in cups, I think this is a chance for Palace to be pretty refreshed for this game. And I think when Palace are at their best, they're such a hard team to beat. I think maybe what Wolves can look to do here, though, is force Palace to break them down, because Crystal Palace are a very effective side on the counter-attack, getting the ball moving quickly. Wolves shouldn't allow them to do this. This is sort of how they should be setting up in this game. It may be seen as defensive, but it's sort of how you're going to play right now if you're a weaker side against Crystal Palace. For this game, I'm going to go with a 3-1 away win for Crystal Palace. I think they're just too strong for Wolves, and I think Strand Larsen might get a goal to sort of, hopefully for Wolves' sake, get his season going. So then we're on to Newcastle United versus Manchester City. And look, people will say, oh, Newcastle have no chance in this game, I think. They're playing so poor. That is true if you only look at how they're playing away from home. At home, Newcastle haven't been terrible so far this season. They've actually been quite good, especially in the Champions League. And in these sort of big games, Newcastle continue to be able to get up for them. And look, in some of them, they haven't been successful. You look at the Arsenal game and the Liverpool game, where they lost late on. But they played well in those games, and especially the Liverpool game with 10 men. And I think that sort of fight at St James's Park can get you through games. And that's sort of what they've been relying on this season, to get sort of any points on the board. But I did watch Manchester City in their last game against Liverpool, and they were absolutely outstanding. Haaland is just a joke right now. But it's just the overall squad. I just think they're playing really well, Manchester City, and I can't really see them losing this game. But I could see a draw. I'm going to go with a 2-2 draw for this game. I think this is going to be a really good game to watch. So then we're on to Leeds, Aston Villa. And look, Aston Villa going into this game, I think, as strong favourites. They're starting to pick up some good form, especially against that 4-0 win over Bournemouth. And they've won 5 of their last 6 in the league. So there's signs that Villa are starting to improve as a side. Leeds are just really I just don't think they quite have the quality, especially going forward right now. But look, at Ellen Road, they've been a threat so far this season. And I could still see them actually getting something from this game. And more importantly, Villa are without Israel Konsa. So this may give Leeds a chance to score a goal or get a couple of goals in this game. I am actually going to go with, I think, a decent result for Leeds in this game. I'm going to go with a 1-1 draw. So then we're on to Arsenal Spurs. And look, Arsenal go into this game as clear favourites. Despite it being a North London derby, anything can happen, and it is going to be an interesting game. I'm expecting a pretty boring game from this game, if being honest. I think Arsenal, look, they're very defensively minded. And Spurs, look, under Thomas Frank, they're a bit more pragmatic, and I'm expecting that sort of approach away from home in this game. But there is one massive injury for Arsenal, and that is Gabriel is out for this game. Absolute relief, I think, if you're a Spurs fan, really. So that threat from a set piece is gone. In saying this, though, they've still got players like Saliba, they've still got Mascara, they've still got height in that box, and I still think they could definitely score from a set piece. Spurs have also been very effective from set pieces this game, so this is what I'm saying. I just can't see a very interesting game to be honest. How I look at this game, though, is I think if Arsenal make excuses for losing because they have Gabriel out, I'm actually going to get frustrated because there is no excuses because Spurs have so many players out for this game. Players like Dejan Kulusevski, crucial players for the Spurs side, which we haven't even got to see this season. Madison's also out. So all that creativity that Spurs really have isn't really present, I don't think. Colomawani's also currently injured. There's so many players out for both sides. So I really think that Arsenal, it doesn't matter the fact you've got players out. Spurs have got just as many players out. In fact, they've got more out. And look, you can argue that those are more crucial players for Arsenal. But that's because your players overall have high quality. You should be able to replace them in. There's no excuses in this game, Arsenal. Arsenal have to win this North London derby. And look, I think they will. And I think they will win this game 1-0. I think it's going to be a very classic Arteta performance. And look, if they get some over the line that wins them the league, that's absolutely fine. Because that's all Arsenal need to do at the end of the day, is win the league. I don't think anybody really cares if you're an Arsenal fan how they do this. So then we're on to Manchester United, Everton. And look, this is an interesting game because Manchester United are a side I think play a lot better when they look to counter-attack. But Everton will not allow them to counter-attack. They will very much be the side that will sit in. And they will probably let United have most of the ball. So this will test United. Because under Amarin, they have struggled to break down sides. They're a bit more of a counter-attacking side. The players they have like Brian and Mbeumo's, the Cunhas, they're really effective on the break. But not as effective, I think, as breaking down sides. They also don't have Benjamin Sesko. So we'll probably see a very fluid front three. Probably Mason Mount. Or sort of you could play Bruno even further forward. It's going to be a fluid front three because Sesko is unavailable, injured for this game. Everton are without Jared Brantwaite as they continue to be. And look, I think this is a problem for Everton in terms of defensively keeping out goals. Michael Keane is actually more of a threat going forward. That's, I think, than actually defensively at this point. He's actually brilliant going forward. And at some point, this sounds crazy, but there's been discussion around this. If Beto and Barry keep playing so badly, why don't you just try a big centre forward or just a big centre half up front at this point instead of like a Michael Keane, because he actually offers sort of what I think David Moyes wants. Look, he's not going to be as effective in terms of running in behind, but he can hold up the ball, he can be a target man, basically a Moyes number 9. And Beto and Barry are so crap that actually might be the option at this point. I could see this happening. For this game though, I am going to go with a Manchester United win. I'm going to go with a 2-0 win for United. I think they're just going to struggle without that sort of number 9, that presence up front to win this game. And I'm expecting United to eventually find a way to break them down. Then Everton will be forced to have a bit more of a go. And then United will win the game 2-0 on the counter-attack. So that is the end of this video. Let me know your Premier League predictions for Game Week 12. And if you enjoyed this video, subscribe to the channel as well as liking the video.